Hi there. I'm just your average traveler who stumbled upon something extraordinary. Let me tell you about Fernando David. Once a Marine, Fernando traded his uniform for a set of house keys, starting with just one rental property. But Fernando had a dream: to revolutionize how we travel and own property. He founded Dream Vacations by PMI, turning one small rental into a hospitality empire. Fernando's secret? Treating every guest like family and every home like his own. His team mastered digital storytelling, making every trip feel like a blockbuster adventure. Fernando didn't just help travelers. He transformed overwhelmed hosts into thriving business owners. His travel agency bundled beautiful stays with affordable flights, making Dream Vacations a reality for thousands. Whether you're chasing sunsets or returns on investment, with Fernando, you've struck gold. Fernando David isn't just building a business. He's building dreams, one happy traveler at a time.
All right, welcome back, my beautiful people, to STR News Digest, where we break down what's happening in the short-term rental world, as well as the travel space, so that you can stay informed if you're planning to either book a short-term rental, travel, or enter the STR world. I got some feedback, but anyway. Today, I got a lot of cover today, and I know today is not usually the day I go live. I usually go live on Wednesday. But because there's some important information, specifically if you're planning to travel to Europe and some South American countries, I want to touch base because I just had an incident with a client who was not aware of a couple of situations that are happening related to visas, specifically Brazil. And I want to touch on that. So some of the topics that I want to cover are going to be Airbnb and Booking.com's latest earnings report. And the reason I want to cover that is because if you are in the short-term rental world or you use short-term rentals, this information is important if you use it wisely. Number two is the travel chaos that's happening specifically in Western Europe. I'm going to touch on that. And if you're planning to travel, like, for example, Spain, you really want to pay attention to what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about some incidents that are happening around the world. Some of them have become international news. And I don't want you to be that guy because you're screwing it up for all of us. Next, I'm going to talk about some major closures to some big theme parks that have been around for centuries. And then if we have time, I want to talk about go deeper into international travel, specifically on the entry points, so that you can be aware of, especially if you traveled. Like, let's use Medellin, Colombia, for example. Many of you have been there before. There has been some slight changes in traveling to Medellin. If you've been there within the last couple of months, you know what I'm talking about. The lines are insane. We're going to talk about as to why that is happening. But right now, let's see which story I want to get into first. Let's talk about Europe, because I think this one's important. If you are planning to travel specifically to Spain, Spain has been getting bombarded with a lot of issues lately. If you're not aware, several weeks ago, they had several countries, Spain, Portugal, and parts of southern France had a complete blackout. And that blackout lasted, depending on where you were and what city you were in, anywhere between 6 and 10 hours. That disrupted everything, not just people that lived there, but if you were planning to travel there and you have tickets or plane tickets or you were staying there, you know firsthand how this was disrupted for you. Here's the latest. Just early this morning, early in the morning on their time, they had, and I'm going to go right into their news article. They had some thieves, which is kind of crazy to me how this could have happened. And I'm reading out of the Sun newspaper out of Spain, and the title is "Travel Chaos in Spain as Trains Halted and Passengers Would Hit with Delays After Someone Stowed Some Cables, which created some power outages." Again, related to power. Now, I'm going to read some of the stuff out of the article because it's funny to me, and I apologize for all those that were affected by it. But my God, man, with all the security systems and all the cameras and surveillance that Spain specifically has, and how this and the power outage happened is beyond me, man, because it really shouldn't happen. Some people are, for example, the Minister of Transportation, Oscar Puente, called this a serious act of sabotage. And when I heard him say that, I was like, you think when the entire train system is shut down from Madrid all the way to Sevilla, I would say that's a serious act of sabotage. But now, you said something going on? Because I'm hearing a lot of background, and I think it's coming from you. But anyway, as I was saying, in the article, it says that the trains affected were the high-speed trains, but I have people on the ground who tell me it didn't just affect the high-speed trains, it also affected local trains. And it was just straight chaos what happens. And it's something that unfortunately I don't think is going to be a rare occasion, especially in Europe, because and I don't know how anyone feels about this, but I personally am totally against it. Spain and a lot of Western European countries are trying to get to net zero as it relates to carbon, right, to the environment. And personally, we're not ready for that. And what happened in that outage is living proof that we're not ready for it, and B, it doesn't work, people. It may work 10, 15, 20 years down the line, but right now it doesn't. And I think they're rushing things, and we're going to see a lot more issues like this, especially in those Western European countries. So stay on top of the news, people, if you're planning to travel. If you don't have a travel advisor whose job is it to stay on top of the latest news, then you need to do your due diligence and make sure that you're aware of what's happening to countries you're going to. Like the Middle East, as you know, unrest, right? There's a lot going on around the world that you need to be aware of. So let me segue to entry points in a lot of these countries. Starting in Q4 of 2024, and specifically now going into 2025, the U.S. is not the only country tracking down or not tracking down, hammering down on immigration. Lots of countries are really hammering down on immigration and trying to curb illegal immigration. And in the process, people visiting there are getting caught up in this crackdown, and they're really enforcing a lot of the laws that they currently have in place that in the past they were a little lenient, right? And then there have been some changes. So let me start with Brazil. If you're not aware, in Brazil, now a U.S. citizen traveling to Brazil is required to have a passport. Not a passport, I'm sorry, is required to have a visa. You have to apply to get your visa if you're a U.S. citizen and you're flying into Brazil. There's other countries involved, but I'm specifically talking about U.S. citizen at this point. I recommend that you look at the tourism board to see what other countries are affected by this visa requirement for Brazil. The other countries that I'm going to talk about don't have or haven't added any extra visa requirements, but they have extended the interview process, and there's certain things they're looking for that I need you to be aware of. So I'm going to go quickly down this list of some of the countries that are really cracking down on not just illegal immigration, but are really trying to enforce the laws that are in place and make it I don't think they're trying to make it difficult for you to travel there, but there's definitely been some pushback from tourism because, as I mentioned many times before, some of these countries are really being overwhelmed by over tourism. And the first one I'm going to talk about, and if you follow this channel, you've heard me say this before, is Spain. But I'm going to go down this list. You got Spain, Turkey, Dubai, South Korea, Japan, Indonesia, and then you have what's this country I wrote down here? I can't read my own writing, but anyway, those countries have really cracked down on visitors. And here's what you need to understand. Number one is obviously you have to have a valid passport to go in. But in addition to that, this is extremely important. Most countries only allow you to visit there without a visa for 90 days. If you want to extend that, you have to get a visa or apply to a visa to extend that stay, or you have to leave the country. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Indonesia, a lot of people go to Bali. A lot of people go there, especially if they're remote workers or nomads or digital nomads. That country is really cracking down on those that overstay that 90-day requirement. And here's what they're doing. Turkey is doing this. Dubai is doing this. A lot of the Middle Eastern countries are doing this. They're actually spying on you in terms of your social media. They're tracking. For example, there was an incident that came out in the paper of a digital nomad that had overextended his 90-day stay. I believe he was there for 120 days. And he was not only arrested, but he had to pay a big fine. And then he was deported because he stayed over 120 days. And the way they got him was through social media, because he was a social media influencer, a blogger, and he was blogging everything he did. And they used that as evidence against him during his hearing, in which, again, he had to pay a big fine, and then he got deported from the country, and now he can't go back, right? So be mindful of that. The next thing, we're seeing a lot of people getting turned away during the interview process. So, and this applies to everyone, but specifically to solo travelers like myself. I've noticed in the last year and a half that I have been scrutinized and oftentimes even sent to secondary because I'm a solo traveler. Solo travelers is an indicator. There's a couple of indicators, right? Last minute bookings, which I do all the time. Traveling by myself, which I do all the time. Not traveling with the necessary luggage. You know, for example, when I go to Europe, I spend 30 days, but I still only carry a backpack, right? For that hearing officer, for that immigration officer that you run into, for them, that's a red flag. And I fully understand that, you know, based on my past life. I look for those indicators, and those are some of the indicators that they look for. But in addition to that, here's what they also look for, because you're going to get questioned even more. And some of these questions are being applied across the board. Like, for example, where are you staying? You have to provide the address of the hotel or Airbnb you're staying. How much money are you bringing? You have to tell them how much money are you bringing. Does the money that you say you're bringing and or have, does that coincide with the length of stay that you're telling them you're going to stay? You also need to make sure that your passport will be valid during your stay. I've already mentioned this a couple of times. You need a minimum of 3 empty pages on your passport, and your passport needs to be, the expiration date needs to be valid up to 6 months, which is the minimum, when you enter that country. So, for example, if your passport expires in September of this year, don't travel, because it's going to be, the time frame is shorter than that 6-month period that they're looking for, and you will be denied entry. The U.S. is not going to look at that. You're going to be able to board your flight. You're going to be able to leave. But when you land, if you don't have that 6-month window or you don't have those 3 empty pages on your passport, you're not going to be allowed. Very important you guys understand that. All right. Now let's talk about that guy, right? There's been several incidents. And I think one of the reasons why a lot of these countries are also hammering down on visitors is because visitors lately are being assholes, right? Don't be, when you go to a different country, it's not the US. Most of these countries, you don't have the freedoms you have in the US. And I'm going to give you a couple of incidents. I went to, I won't mention the country, but I went to a foreign country recently. And I was staying at this very nice resort. And it was all inclusive. And in the resort, we had a couple US citizens from New York City who got stupid drunk, got disorderly. That hotel didn't play that. They went to kick them out. The husband, again, heavily intoxicated, felt that he was being discriminated and kept yelling, "You can't do this to me. I'm a US citizen. Trump's going to deport you." All I kept thinking is, I understand it's the alcohol that's having this guy talk and say these stupid, moronic, dumb things. But the issue here is he kept mentioning that he's a US citizen. What is everyone else thinking? They're thinking there's another gringo asshole, and thinking he's all that because he has that blue passport. People, you're not all that. You're in another country. Respect that country. Act accordingly. And we're seeing this all over the place. And one of the incidents that I want to talk about happened in Rome recently. Some US tourists wanted to take a picture in the Colosseum, and I don't know what possessed them to climb up. If you've ever been to Rome, there's they have a fence. It's a metal fence with spokes at the top. This guy, for whatever reason, wanted to take a selfie up there, but he slipped and impaled himself. And he was hanging there for 20 minutes until rescue came to get him out. Screaming and yelling. The screams and yells and the pain that he was exposed to was so great that he ended up passing out. But the point here is, why do that? No selfie is worth it, right? I'm seeing it more and more. And it's not just US citizens, but unfortunately, US citizens are the ones that like to be loud and boisterous and let everyone know that they are US citizens. But understand that when you go to another country, you're not in the US. The laws that you think protect you here in the US may not necessarily protect you there. So please act accordingly. Don't make it harder for the rest of us when we travel to these countries. And one last thing, I'm going to talk about that. When you go to another country, again, if you want to be respected and you want to have an easier time when you're there, there's a couple of things you need to do. Understand the culture. I've already said this before. If you go to Spain, you go to France, you go to Italy, and you go to a restaurant, it's not the same as going to a restaurant here. For them, especially dinner, it's slow. Don't expect to get your meal right away. They truly take hours at dinner. The service people, they're not being rude when they're not coming up to you. They don't do that unless you actually call them. And when you call them, they'll say, "Hey," right? Wait till you make eye contact and just wave them over if you need something, or get up and walk up to them if you need something. But don't yell across the restaurant for someone to come attend to you. But understand, it is different. And if you learn a little bit of the language, it goes a long way. I'm going to tell you, France, for example, I had people who knew, or waiters who I know knew English, and I've seen them go up to customers and pretend they don't know English. Why? Because the customer's being an asshole, right? So again, try to learn a little bit of the culture. Try to learn a little bit of the language, at least the basic, like thank you, basic stuff that's easy to learn. It truly goes a long way. All right, let's continue. Let's see. Let's go to the next. Oh, I want to share this real quick because this really is going to help a lot of you guys. Right now, if you are traveling anywhere, Viator, which is a company, if you're not familiar with it, is to book experiences. Right now on my Instagram stories, or it's not right now, but once I get off here, I'm going to be posting a discount code for Viator that will give you 10% off any tour or experience that you want to take when you're traveling. Take advantage of that. The link will be in my stories on Instagram once I finish this. Next, sales. Love sales, specifically if it's a business class ticket. I've talked about this before, but right now, if you're traveling from, I'll give you the cities. If you're traveling from New York City, LAX, SFO, which is San Francisco, the Washington Airport, the Chicago airports, which includes O'Hare and Midway, and Miami, you can get a business class ticket to Spain, Portugal, Germany, Switzerland, Netherlands, France, Egypt, Greece, Italy, and Turkey for $1,209. $1,209. It's $1,209 on United, Swiss Air, TAP Airlines. People, business class tickets for the price of a regular ticket to go to Europe. This is what's for sale now. You have to DM me the word Sky, and I will give you all the details on that if you're interested in that. All right, so let's move on to the next story. This next story for me is a little sad. I used to be a big fan of this theme park, and they have announced that they are closing after 25 years. And the theme parks are Six Flags. Six Flags announced plans to permanently shut down theme parks after 25 years. Excuse me. Again, if you're a fan of Six Flags, hurry up and go there, enjoy it, because they're closing down. All right, let's go into the earnings for Airbnb and Booking.com. So Booking.com posted a first solid quarterly financial report highlighting continued growth in its alternative accommodation segment. Remember, I'm going to I'm going to talk about this because I mentioned this before. Booking.com considers short-term rentals as their alternative accommodations, whereas Airbnb doesn't, right? Don't tell Brian Chesky that his company is an alternative accommodation company because he gets offended. It's not. But for Booking, because Booking has hotels on there and their primary business and how they started was through hotel rooms, they consider short-term rentals as an alternative accommodation, which is why they mentioned it, right? And this category is the fastest growing category for Booking.com. Alternative accommodation grew by 12% year over year. Alternative accommodation listings rose to 8.1 million globally. That's crazy. 8.1 million properties are listed on Booking.com today. The segment now makes up 37% of all Booking.com's reservations, up by 36% from Q1 of last year. So the growth is there. Now, again, if you follow the channel, we talked about this particular, about the growth and how a lot of companies are quote unquote changing their perspective because of what's happening globally. I've said this before. I report the news. I report what's happening in the news. But as you may be aware, if you're a little bit astute of what's happening with media today, you can't believe everything you read or hear or see, because mainstream media has been corrupt, and has been corrupt for years. Again, I'll tell you the news, and I'm going to tell you my personal experience. I have not seen a slowdown in travel, and the numbers, if you actually dig deep into the numbers, like for example, I always look at the TSA travel numbers. And so far, the numbers are only going up. And again, which is probably one of the reasons why we're seeing a lot of these countries having issues with over tourism. If travel was declining, we wouldn't be getting all these issues. And people talking about banning short-term rentals because they're blaming short-term rentals for the housing crisis, etc. So that takes care of booking. Let's see if we go into where's Airbnb, because I thought I had Airbnb here. Here's Airbnb. Let's go into Airbnb. Now, Airbnb reported, here's their numbers, 2.3 billion in Q1. Again, an increase for Airbnb. It's not as great as Booking, but it's a 6% year-over-year increase for Booking.com. So let's move on to see what's also important here. Your Q1 of 2024 boosting last year's numbers. If you strip out those effects and currency shifts, revenue growth would have been 11%. So here's what that means. Because Airbnb and Booking affects Booking the same, currency really affects the currency market, really affects the revenue status. The US dollar has been super strong, but a lot of other currencies have not been. I talked about this before, which is one of the reasons I highly recommend people to go to places like Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, because the dollar goes a long way in those countries. You know, right now it's still over 4-1 to go to Colombia. So your dollar goes a long way. But that affects the bottom line for companies like Airbnb. If it wasn't for that, for the dollar being so strong and other currencies being so weak, they would have had an 11% increase. But right now they're looking at a 6% increase. But nonetheless, man, it's billions of dollars, right? Here's the key stats. 143.1 million nights and experience have been booked on Airbnb, which is an 8% increase year over year. Gross booking value has gone up by 7%. And if you adjust the currency, it's 9% to $24.5 billion. And they have a 807 million in shares repurchased since Q12. Again, the market is high. Brian Chesky also noted that 5 countries, the US, Australia, Canada, UK, and France, accounts for nearly 70% of Airbnb's business. I'm going to repeat that because that's a big freaking number. The US, Australia, Canada, the UK, and France account for 70% of Airbnb's business. Now, you as a short-term rental host, why is this important? Why is this important to you? I said this before. A lot of you are very reliant on Airbnb. And a lot of you, especially if you're in one of the countries I just mentioned, you are almost dependent on them, which is why I preach marketing, 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 and direct bookings. You need to be pushing to be more diverse, push for more direct bookings, and you need marketing. Having said that, I said we already announced our ebook that's being released. It's on pre-sale now, but we have, Lorena and I have created an ebook that will help you not only grow your business, but definitely help you make a lot more money. And it's a very in-depth, step-by-step digital guidebook that helps you from everything from how to create your listing with a marketing perspective, right? Because I think that's the biggest mistake most short-term rental operators make. They will create a listing from their personal perspective. Can't do that. You have to identify who your avatar is or your ideal guest is, and then that's the starting point. And then from there, you need to build out your listing, your descriptions, your amenities, and your marketing plan. Now, this digital guidebook that we have created, that again, it's on pre-sale, and the link will be down below, we'll walk you through that. In addition, if you buy during our pre-sale, it's going to be available June 1st, right? June 1st, it'll be available. But if you buy June 1st, then you're going to pay the regular price for it. But if you buy during the pre-sale, here's what you're going to get. You're going to get a discount on that ebook, and you're going to have the ability, if space is available, to purchase or not purchase, to book a time slot with me and Lorena. So you can ask any question. It's a 30-minute video call that we can dive deep into what your needs are and how to optimize the use of that ebook. Again, I highly recommend, if you are in the short-term rental game or planning to get into the short-term rental game, to buy the ebook. Trust me when I tell you, it's going to be the best investment you will ever make, especially if you're new, because you'll start off on the right foot. If you're already a short-term rental operator, you may have to adjust certain things here or there. And I'm going to bet money that you will have to adjust certain things. But man, it is a wealth of knowledge. It's a labor of love that we put into it, of everything that I've done in this business, all the mistakes that I've learned, all the mistakes that I've made, and what I learned from those mistakes, and what actually works. And again, we have actual case studies, so you can see it's not just something that we're writing and saying that it works. No, we're going to show you through case studies how it worked. Anyway, I think that is it for today. Let me make sure I covered everything. Did I give you? Yep, I did give you that. Let me see. Go through my. Yes, that is all for today, my beautiful people. Please, I need a big favor, man. Don't just hit that like button. Number one, I want you to hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed, I need you to subscribe. But here's what's important. I need you to comment. I don't care if you put something nasty. Just say something in the comment section, because it truly does help the algorithm out by all the comments that are put in there and the engagement. It'll help us grow quicker. I really, really, really would appreciate it. It's free, doesn't cost you anything, and it really helps us a lot. Anyway, love you guys. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I will see you on the next one.